Penn State needs an exorcist if James Franklin is going to be able to lead this team to a national championship this year, because every time James Franklin goes into these big games, he always sees demons. And Penn State is not going to have a shot at winning it all unless they are able to help James Franklin overcome his big game demons, such as when he plays Ohio State, who he is 1-10 against. He also is 3-19 in his career at Happy Valley against top 10 ranked teams. And what's so strange about James Franklin is that the excuse that's made for him is that for the last couple of years prior to this one, he didn't have what was necessary to beat Ohio State, which is kind of shocking to me because Penn State only lost to Ohio State last year by one possession. So it's not as if Penn State was just at a huge talent disadvantage. Hell, the last 8 games that Penn State and Ohio State have played, half of them have came down to one possession. So it would be one thing if Penn State was just getting blown out the water and it was 48-17. It was like a FBS versus FCS kind of matchup. But the games have been relatively close these last couple of years. So I don't necessarily think that James Franklin has been at this huge resource and talent disadvantage as what is led on, right? And then another thing, Michigan beat Ohio State last year with both of their hands tied behind their backs, essentially because they had no quarterback. So how is it that a down Michigan team can beat Ohio State as a 3-touchdown underdog, but Penn State, who is better than what Michigan was last year, was unable to get the job done? Listen, we need to get a priest. We need to get an exorcist. We need to get somebody down here who can help James Franklin get rid of these demons that he sees every time Penn State goes up against a good team. And another thing is that if you want to make the argument that there was a huge talent discrepancy between Ohio State and Penn State, okay, what about Oregon? What went wrong in that one? Because I don't think that the talent was too far off. In Oregon, there was some concerns about them entering the Big Ten. They're a West Coast team. They're not going to be able to sustain the level of physicality needed to compete in the Big Ten. Well, this West Coast team came in and kicked the Big Ten in their you-know-whats. And the game wasn't really all that competitive for the most part. So what was the holdup for Penn State coming up short in the Big Ten championship? Penn State, it's not as if they don't recruit at a high level, which James Franklin is one of the best recruiters in college football. They also develop talent at an incredibly high rate. They put as many guys in the NFL as what Ohio State, Michigan, and all of the other elite programs in college football do. Every season, Penn State walks into the year with elite offensive line play and a bunch of freak athletes on the defensive line. Wide receiver play was a huge hindrance to Penn State last year, but it's ironic that Keandre Lambert-Smith wasn't a good receiver at Penn State. Then all of a sudden he goes to Auburn and he looks like an effective receiver. If you would have had Keandre Lambert-Smith last year, maybe your season would have been a lot better. So for all the excuses that get made for James Franklin, you can come back with some valid counterpoints, because I don't think that Penn State has been too far off from being able to beat Ohio State as what it's been led on to. And yeah, they do return a bunch of production. You got 2 of the best running backs in college football, and Katron Allen, Nicholas Singleton, a top 5 offensive line, a stout defense, especially with Jim Knowles coming over as the defensive coordinator, who could be an upgrade from Tom Allen. He's been the best DC in the sport for the past 3 seasons. But despite the amount of talent that Penn State has this year, what's going to determine if they can win that national championship is going to be if James Franklin can finally find a way to face his big game demons. And the only way that's going to be able to happen is if Penn State calls up an exorcist. They got to call up somebody, man, because I don't think he's going to be able to do so. Not just can you not beat Ohio State and Oregon, but you also struggle in the top 10 games that you play out of conference. Like for Penn State, last year, do you guys realize what's the easiest path that they will ever have to a national championship again? You lost the Big Ten championship, and yet you got blessed with SMU in the first round at home. Then you get to play Boise State, which was a gimme. Then you got to play Notre Dame, who most folks thought that you had a really good chance to win, and yet you were unable to get through. Meanwhile, Oregon wins the Big Ten championship, and you know what they get for that? They had the luxury of having a bye week and playing Ohio State right after. Imagine if you would have had to play Ohio State last season with a bye. It wouldn't have voted well for you. And I don't think that James Franklin's shortcomings against Ohio State is all due to talent. You've had guys like Jahan Dotson, Alou Fashanu, Abdul Carter. You have just as many freaks as what Ohio State does. So I don't necessarily think that the issue has been talent. I think that the issue is the man on the sidelines, James Franklin. And I've said this before and I'm going to say it again. James Franklin is college football's new Mark Richt. He's a good coach. He can win you 10 games every season. He can get you in the New Year's Six bowl game. He can get you in the playoff competition. But the downside with James Franklin is that, yeah, he wins a lot of games, but he doesn't win the most important ones. And if you can't beat Ohio State, how are you going to be able to beat any of the better teams come playoff time? How are you going to be able to beat whoever that you face in the Big Ten championship? There's a lot of questions that we don't have answers to when it comes to James Franklin. And it just seems like this rinse, wash, and repeat cycle every offseason with Penn State. There are the Big Ten offseason paper champions. Then when the season comes around, they get kicked in the ass by Ohio State and all of the other top 10 teams that they go up against. And I don't see this year being any different. If Penn State wins the national championship, they need to play a bunch of SMUs and Boise States to do so, because anytime they go up against a good team that's well coached, James Franklin, little game James Franklin, just always comes up small because his big game demons just get in the way of Penn State winning a national title. And I don't see that being any different in 2025. They need to call Exorcist. I'm going to say it again. If they don't call an Exorcist, the big game demons are not only going to continue to haunt James Franklin, but they're going to haunt Penn State and hold this team back once again from living up to the offseason hype that they seem to always get.